Like I said, my name is Shannon Alvord, and I'm part of the Tompkins County Emergency Operations Center's Public Information Team. The health department, in collaboration with numerous healthcare providers from across the county, is pleased to present to our community the series of Q&A opportunities regarding the safety and efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccine. If you've tuned in last week for one of our sessions, you'll know that we do wrap things up at 1 o'clock, and we will try to get to everyone's questions as they come in. If we cannot get to your questions today, I will be sure to record those, and we will address them at our upcoming COVID-19 town hall event that will be happening tomorrow, Wednesday, February 17th at 5 o'clock. Public Health Director Frank Krupa will be there, along with County Administrator Jason Molino, and we will really discuss questions about the vaccine's distribution and administration at that time. So please keep in mind that today's Q&A is to focus on vaccine concerns and will not be answering questions about vaccine administration or distribution at this time. But please do feel free to submit those questions to me in the chat, because we will be able to talk about those tomorrow. So send those questions to me. We might not answer them right now, but we will be sure to answer them tomorrow. So go ahead and send me whatever questions you have through the Q&A section or through the chat. You can do so anonymously if you would like. If you would prefer to ask your question out loud, we will allow some time at the end of the session to do so. So just raise your hand. I'll put your name down in order as I see them. We are recording the session so that we can share it with others post-event, but please let us know if there is a question you would like to be asked privately, and we can remove that from the recording before we post the footage. I'd like to encourage everyone, if you've not already done so, to register for vaccine alerts with either the Swift 911 system, which can send you a call, a text message, or an email, or you can sign up for the County Health Department's vaccine-only email list. I'll put those links in the chat box in just a minute. Many questions about vaccine distribution you could find the answers for those on the Tompkins County Health Department website. You can also call our wonderful 211 with additional questions. So with that, I think I will welcome our guests for today. Very pleased to have Judy and Ryan for Reach Medical. So why don't you kick us off? Just introduce yourself, tell us about your background, tell us a little bit about Reach Medical, and why did you feel that it would be important to participate in this discussion today?
I'll go. My name's Liz Ryan, and I grew up here in Ithaca as Liz Bogle. Hi, people I know as Bogle. And let's see, I trained in family medicine, so I'm a family physician, and trained in Boston and then in Seattle, and wanted to do family medicine partly because it was about community care and not just a body system, not just a body, not just a human, but community medicine. I think that's part of what sort of drives my interest in health and medicine. And so after training, I actually did a geriatrics fellowship, and then came back to Ithaca, and was practicing in a couple different family practice settings, always outpatient. Worked in town at Cuga Family Medicine, worked up in Ovid, worked down in Maine by Binghamton. And then when Reach Medical was opening, I really shifted my focus to a different kind of medicine, and have been there since we opened now almost 3 years ago. So Reach Medical, and Judy can we have different roles at Reach, so you can get our two perspectives on it, but Reach is a nonprofit organization founded by Dr. Justine Waldman, who was an emergency room physician, and then worked at the syringe exchange through STAP, Southern Tier AIDS Prevention. And so we're a clinic that is really dedicated in the heart of what everything we do to opening medicine to populations that in the past and continuously do not get adequate service or sort of respect and access and quality of care. And so though our main mission in opening was to address the overdose crisis. And so we do a lot of quote addiction medicine, a lot of using medications to help people who are trying to use less or no opioids, like heroin. But we do a much broader range of work now. And so I'm in the primary care department, and what that's meant for me, and this was sort of unknown what this would feel like, but the primary care department at Reach really tries to re-welcome people back into good health, whatever that means. So, do you have diabetes that you hadn't sought care for or didn't feel welcome seeking care for? Were you kicked out of practices because you couldn't make appointments because your car was busted and your kid needed you? Have you been embarrassed to talk to someone and be vulnerable and get help for the things that would really help in your life? So I do a lot of what feels like catch-up care, like, the pap smear that hasn't been done for 20 years, or, let's finally treat some of that depression. So it's incredibly rewarding work. And 3 years in, I sort of can't imagine seeing a different population or working with better people. And there's so many different arms to reach. And I think I'll tag in Judy to talk about research, and I bet we'll get to outreach work later on.
Wow, Liz, that was awesome. I'm Judy Griffin. I'm another, physician who works at Reach Medical. I think Liz maybe mentioned this, but just highlight what our name stands for. It's respectful, equitable access to compassionate healthcare. And it's a health equity nonprofit medical practice with a bunch of, essentially mission-driven clinicians and other, individuals that work as a team, really collectively, to try to reach folks who are traditionally stigmatized or marginalized within our healthcare system. And, so my background coming into this, I'm from the state of Maine. Sometimes I say from Maine, and that's confusing. From the state of Maine, where I grew up. So I'm familiar with sort of rural and small town life, but I did my medical education and residency training in New York City at Columbia, and then at Montefiore Medical Center, which is a huge academic medical center in the Bronx, where I trained in what is called social medicine. My field is internal medicine, which is essentially general medicine for adults, pediatrics for adults. And a lot of folks who go into my line of work have an interest in either medical education or research. And that's those are my interests also. But I was really fortunate to work with a group of medical providers that have been largely serving folks in the Bronx for decades, but really around an opioid crisis that emerged there in the 1970s, followed by the HIV/AIDS epidemic that ravaged communities in that part of the country. So it's really people who've been working what we call harm reduction for decades. And so I received training and education about providing medical care in a way that was informed by social justice, equity, and harm reduction. And really what it thinks about is taking into account how your work plays into systems of power and hierarchy that are pre-existing. And so as a healthcare worker, you want to be aware of the way in which you participate in that system and really seek to root out inequity and injustices and power differentials in that system that really keep people sick. And so if you really are trying to improve health, part of that is recognizing and working, to root out those power structures that really do keep individuals and communities unhealthy. And so, I came into medicine with that kind of framework. And when I moved to Ithaca 5 years ago, I had the very good, incredible privilege of working with Dr. Ann Costello and Dr. Lucia Yander, along with their team, for about 3 years as a primary care physician, which was an incredible learning experience. They're two, esteemed clinicians in our community, but my real heart and passion has been working at Reach, where I started 3 years ago, like Liz, but only on a part-time basis. And then about a year ago, transitioned into a full-time role as the director of research there. And, basically what we're trying to do at Reach is fundamentally provide high quality healthcare to people who haven't been able to access it for so many of the reasons we're aware of, but really the structural and social determinants of health that both drive people's inability to access healthcare and ultimately health disparities and unequal health outcomes that we've seen play out so vividly with the COVID-19 pandemic. So, what we're trying to do at Reach is flip the script, do things in a different way. It's about shared decision-making, really providing people options. So in a harm reduction philosophy, which is really just about focusing on pragmatism, social justice, the essential belief in the dignity of all people, and incremental change. And so that's what we do. And that is certainly valuable and useful when providing care for substance use disorders like opioid use disorder or alcohol use disorder. Those are addictions. Those are the clinical terms we use. But they apply to all aspects of really the human existence and health. And so, as the last year with the COVID-19 pandemic playing out, we have really doubled down on being a lifeline to our patients. There's sort of been a dual, a parallel pandemic in terms of overdose that has been going on. And what we had seen previously was a flattening of the curve of overdose deaths between, that had really been skyrocketing since 2000 through 2016, and then really flattened between 2017 and 2018, and have surged again. And they're up about at least 20% between 2019 and 2020. So, we're trying to make sure we're staying connected to our patients, providing them access to life-saving treatment through medications for opioid use disorder and naloxone distribution, harm reduction, primary care, acute care services, testing and treatment for hepatitis C and HIV, integrated behavioral health care with counseling, psychological and psychiatric services, and now outreach, which Liz alluded to. So we have, in response to the pandemic, in collaboration with other community-based organizations, pivoted to doing outreach work with our community health worker who previously worked with our team in-house, and now, along with a nurse from our team, has been doing incredible work to facilitate telemedicine visits for people experiencing homelessness and others who may be unable to engage in healthcare through, the telephone, through audiovisual connections, whether it's through a smartphone or what have you. So many of our patients can access care through telemedicine, but some can't. And so we have been trying to work to facilitate telemedicine access and also perform COVID testing in the pockets of our community that are most vulnerable and wouldn't have access to COVID testing because, we know our community has had a tremendous effort, but things like transportation and other barriers can prevent people from accessing the systems that have been set up. So we're working in partnership to address those. guess we'll stop there. I don't know if there's
And
anything.
I would just
Yeah.
add vaccine distribution to that too,
Yep.
right? So, there was a hepatitis A outbreak that
Yes.
our outreach team helped test for and administer vaccines to prevent. And starting yesterday, whoop, whoop,
Yeah.
COVID vaccinations to unhoused people.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great partnership.
That's an excellent overview of Reach Medical, and I'm sure that there's even things that are not included in the description you just gave. And thank you so much for all that you do for folks in our community. I echo the statement from Margot, who's joined us today from BOCES. So I would just add to that, given all of the historical and systemic challenges of access to healthcare, of trust in healthcare, and all of the unequal health outcomes and all of that, certainly a concern during COVID as ever. What would you add to the conversation about, given all of those historical challenges, why should folks trust the COVID vaccine is something that they should trust and receive?
So I'll just say that rebuilding trust is at the foundation of what we've done, what we try to do at Reach. So the patients we have tried to we provide care to are people who have, because of their medical condition, in many cases because they suffer a substance use disorder, have their existences have been criminalized, and their encounters with the healthcare system have been criminalized. And so there's tremendous mistrust of the healthcare system among our patients. And so it's an area of work that I think is at the root of what we're doing, and what at the very heart of what we try to do as a team-based healthcare workers at Reach is earn our patients' trust. It's not a situation where like we feel like, can we trust them? It's like we want them to trust us. And it's a whole shift in mindset, but I think it's really effective. Our retention rate is around 80% in terms of retention and care for treatment for opioid use disorder at around 3 months. And that compares to rates of like 40% being a high rate in other treatment settings. So it's a really, really effective approach. And I think what has allowed us to thrive and expand during COVID is that at our foundation was an acknowledgement that these inequities and these structural factors, including racism and other forms of oppression, have permeated our healthcare system, and we have to actively identify them, call them out, root them out, and it's on us to earn individual and community members' trust, thereby allowing. So the burden is on us, and I think the onus is on us to earn trust, and we've done that over time. And also we've partnered with other community-based organizations who have trust within communities we serve. So we've sort of leveraged those partnerships to further expand trust, and then we've delivered. So it's acknowledging that mistrust is very well justified. It's approaching situations with humility and an intention around earning trust, and then delivering on your promises. So it's saying, we're going to provide these services and in this way that's transparent, and then we do. But if we fail, we also want feedback. So I think all of those things enable us at Reach to we're not perfect. I'm not saying there's been no problems or anything, but I think generally speaking, we've done a really good job, and that's the approach we've taken. And I think that applies to COVID very specifically also.
Yeah, I think you made me think of that as an example of sort of equality versus equity, right? That, we could say, well, we, the government, the healthcare system, our only job is to like get the vaccine out there, and we're going to do that in the most efficient way possible. We're going to put it at, all the, libraries or all the fancy office buildings because lots of people go there, right? But the onus really is on us as healthcare workers and as everyone working in public health, which is such an expanded group of people right now, to say, and I think our county's been doing a beautiful job of this, and working in so many partnerships, to say, like, we need to do the work to make sure that the failures of the past, the failures in our housing systems, educational systems, whatever, that we need to overcome those with our response to this pandemic, right? And I don't mean overcome the problems in general, right? Like fix everything. But if we want to do an actually fair job at getting this very effective vaccine to the people who need it, then we got to do the work to find those people and connect them with the vaccine and build that trust. And, one of the things Judy said we do every day at Reach is to make incremental improvements. And so part of my panic, my initial panic about a pandemic was like, we don't have time to make incremental improvements here, right? Like, we need to jump in with both feet, show that we trust the science, talk to the people that we know won't get that message as readily, and do more work to make a better outcome for everybody. Off soapbox.
No, that was a great soapbox, and I'm glad that you got on it. So thank you both for your answers to that question. Can you speak a little more specifically to the COVID-19 vaccine? Just kind of describe what you know about its safety and effectiveness, what it is that you're sharing with folks as you begin your vaccination outreach, and you're interacting with people who may or may not want the vaccine. So just curious if you could share just a little bit more about the vaccine itself, what you know about it.
Sure. Yeah. And I think I'll start with my own misgivings, because that's just sort of how I got to where I am now, where I have very few. But, when the vaccine was first in development, and we were thinking, oh my God, how do you make an awesome vaccine for something super deadly, and make a bazillion vials of it? Like, how is this going to happen? And I didn't realize at that point, because I'm, not in microbiology, the research that had gone on with very similar vaccines. Like, I didn't really know much about what an mRNA vaccine was. And so learning that sort of, SARS, MARS, Zika, flu, rabies, like all these extensive decades of research had gone into things that were very similar, right? So it's like same chassis, different Ford, like a lot of it had been worked out and in very good, slow, methodical scientific detail. So doing some of that research helped me a lot. And that's something that I talk with patients about too. Like, this isn't, some startup making a vaccine de novo out of nowhere. There's a lot more history to it. And I also, the issue of trust for me came in with governmental oversight. And, I'm not speaking for Reach here, I'm speaking for me, that I think had good reason to not trust some of the things that the Trump administration was doing and pressures they seem to be putting on, the CDC, science, truth. And so coupling that with something I was already nervous about, like a deadly pandemic, how are we going to address this? I think for a lot of people gave us misgivings, like, wait, is this getting pushed through for political gain? And so that's when I think, I did a bunch of research to figure out, wait, what is the process for getting emergency approval for vaccines? How can we be sure that we're going through appropriate testing? where did this come from? And so to see, the rigorous science that had already gone into this, to sort of identify some uncorrupted sources who were vetting this, was hugely important to me. And anything new is scary, I think, right, in general. And I knew that, as Judy and I were saying, sort of being physicians in a small community, being connected to people who have great reason for distrust, like it's important for us to do our research and to show that we're willing to do it. And I was talking to a Black man who was a patient of mine, and saying, talking about this stuff and saying, like, what do you hear? Like, what are you feeling? Like there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy? Is there nervousness among friends and colleagues? And he was like, anything that all the white people are scrambling over each other to get, I should probably get, and I think there's some, like, it's a joke, but it was also telling and true, right? Like this is sort of like when the Cabbage Patch Kids were released, everyone wants the vaccine, and are lining up for it. And that to me feels sort of historically very different than, is this an experiment on vulnerable populations, right? Like, no, this is something that is good for everyone and that we need to build trust in.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I'm also not a microbiologist or basic scientist, but, I guess I sometimes I'm nerdy a little bit, and the nerd in me was kind of interested to read.
Did you say a little bit?
Just
a little. Can we go? We're medium.
Medium nerd. It's all relative. It depends. In the harm reduction ground, I'm really nerdy. In Ithaca, New York, I'm like light nerd. So, that this is like everything Liz said. Also went through the same process myself. Because really, as primary care doctors, we want to be able to be trusted sources of information for our patients. And so Liz, myself, others in our practice, trying to stay up on the research. And what has really, stood out to me was the consistency between the findings for the two mRNA vaccines. Both the Pfizer and Moderna showed similar results. So that's sort of that replicability in the scientific method that lends credence to the findings. And above and beyond that, just the sheer number of people enrolled in these clinical trials. We're talking about tens of thousands of people. And the more and more people you enroll in clinical trials, the sort of more confident you can be in the results. So, despite the sort of warp speed at which they were developed, it was building on decades of basic science research around this concept of mRNA vaccines, which was previously being researched and then was accelerated in that certain steps that were typically done independently were overlapped at times, meaning that Pfizer could pursue, manufacturing this while it was still conducting the clinical trial. So, overall, that's not what I talk about with my patients. Basically, what I tell my patients, and Liz and I treat a lot of folks here in Tompkins County, but a lot of people also in rural counties outside of Tompkins County. And these are, a lot of our patients are people who are not vaccinated at all, not necessarily because they're anti-vaxxers. They're just folks who don't go to the doctor, may not get a flu shot. Maybe they don't have health insurance all the time, haven't gotten a pneumonia shot. So, and sort of like, I feel fine, doc, like, why would I do this? So we're talking to people who may not be their framework. And, I'm really just disclosing to people that I felt a little bit nervous too, but what we're, I'm not sort of weighing in my own mind, should I get the vaccine, and that's scary, or versus not get the vaccine. It's like, which am I more afraid of, getting COVID or getting the shot? At the end of the day, that's really what you're comparing. And I'm more afraid of getting COVID. And that's why I got vaccinated. I got vaccinated first chance I got. And I totally agree. I think basically overwhelmingly conversations I've had with patients who are individuals who may have felt hesitant or just don't know how to interpret the information, I told them that I got it, and that I think they should. It's been overwhelmingly that people, want it. And so now it's sort of incumbent upon us to be able to provide access for folks that aren't, online all day, waiting for those slots to open up. So,
one thing, a related question about the mRNA is, like that sounds scary to be getting some like genetic material, like, is this going to like hijack my cells, or is it going to, make COVID that's live and active in my body? So I think it's important to say like the little bit of genetic material is like teaching your cells to make this one marker on coronavirus, like to make a spike protein so that you can make antibodies. So if you get the real thing ever, you have the antibodies and you're ready to like attack and put it down. So there is no live virus. Even the adenovirus vaccine, like the Johnson & Johnson, like it uses a virus as a vector to get it into your body. But that little virus, like that cold virus, is not even a kind of adenovirus that gives people colds, right? So it wouldn't give us symptoms, and it's been tweaked so that it can't make babies, right? So there aren't, like it can't replicate. All it can do is, help you make these antibodies to the spike protein for when the real deal finds you. So I do get into it about that much.
That's a really great description. And from, moderating these events for the past week, like, I think I really appreciate that additional language about it's not going to get you sick and it's not going to make babies. It's not going to replicate itself, but it will, give you the defense team that you need to be able to tackle it if you do encounter the virus. Thank you. To add to that, what else is in this vaccine? Is there, are there things that I'll have an allergic reaction to? Is there egg or shellfish byproducts or things like that? Or why would those additives be a part of this at all?
I only know part of this answer. So, the part I know is that there's particular focus on identifying people who have had, not just a rashy allergic reaction, but true anaphylaxis, like sudden systemic, like throughout the whole body allergic reaction to a couple things. So there are lots of people who have like a bee allergy and it's fine for them to get it, right? Or like a milk intolerance, or I feel pukey when I have eggs, like that's all fine. So there is something called polyethylene glycol, or PEG. And so if people have like a history of anaphylaxis to that's a special group. There also is, it seems, I don't know about the rules oversight about this, but I know that in the vaccination sites, you need to like wait for 15 minutes, because if that big bad anaphylaxis is going to happen, it's going to happen in that period. And so the vaccination staff sort of, has to have all the equipment in case that happens, like EpiPens and, oxygen, that kind of stuff. But it's incredibly rare, and, pretty much everybody is not in that group. And it's quite predictable. To some extent, who is. So yes, there is an allergy risk. Yes, this vaccine is incredibly safe overall.
Yeah, that's more than I know. So thank you, Liz, for fielding that one. But we're not talking about people with like seasonal allergies or something. If you take Claritin because of your hay fever, that shouldn't prevent you from going to get the vaccine. And like Liz said, even our outreach team that went to vaccinate people experiencing homelessness or equipped with EpiPens in the event of an anaphylactic reaction, which hasn't occurred, but of course we should be prepared for.
All right.
We were just educated in real time, and I want to share it. That Shannon, do you want to share that?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So Margot, who knows more about this process than we do, says that people with a history of anaphylaxis are asked to wait 30 minutes at the site after injection. Everyone else 15 minutes. So I was blinded by my lack of anaphylaxis history. So
And I'll just add that, while I have a lot of faith in the science because the clinical trials were enrolled tens of thousands of people, we now have sort of real world experiment, they're not experiments, but real world data collection on millions of people having received the vaccine. And that's being monitored. There's a VSafe app or mechanism through CDC that's asking people to report symptoms they've experienced. And those aren't uncommon. I think I had no symptoms. I felt nothing. Personally, I was like, I have no immune system apparently, but most people will report some, mild fatigue, ranging from, mild fatigue to body aches, certainly some pain at the site of the injection, arm soreness, maybe even low-grade fever, diarrhea. Those have all been reported, and the government is, or the CDC, I should say, is sort of monitoring those things. So as more and more people get vaccinated, we'll become more aware of extremely rare events that occur in only, 1 in a million individuals that may not have been detected in the clinical trials just because they just didn't have enough people to have that occur. So there are efforts to monitor safety on an ongoing basis.
Thanks. That was going to be my next question, was about symptoms. So you read my mind. So you just listed a couple of common symptoms. A question we got last week that I thought was pretty interesting, I'll throw out to you both today. If kind of following what you just shared about your own experience, Judy, if you don't experience symptoms, what's going on? Have you received a dud vaccine?
I'll just say I hope not, and I don't believe so. I think that while this is like with any medication, even anytime there are side effects, it's sort of like we talk to patients about them, but it doesn't mean that most people experience these things. It's just that you may experience these things. So the absence of those does not indicate some sort of, that you got a placebo or you got a dud or whatever. So absolutely not. Even, these are not reported in the majority of people. It's still a minority. I think you end up hearing from people who experience things. Most people, unlike me, I'm going around telling everyone I had no side effects. Most people are just talking about, what they did experience. So, whatever, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the most common occurrence with vaccines is you get protection and not much else happens, right? And that's certainly been my personal experience with vaccines, and for the vast majority of my patients, young and old. And with this one, I had a little bit of a reaction to the second dose. Like I felt a little chilly when I was taking my 5-year-old to pee at midnight, and I thought, oh, I wonder if that's a vaccine reaction. And I was a little sleepy, like could have napped, but yeah, in general, I think it seems like a very well tolerated vaccine. Second dose, there's been, a bit more sort of malaise, fatigue, maybe low grade fever, but what are we comparing that to? Oh, right. Getting COVID, right? Give it to me. Yeah.
So for folks who might express a sentiment of, I really still don't want to get vaccinated. Can I wait for the pandemic to end? Sounds like your expert opinion here is that the risks of COVID are much greater than the risks of the vaccine. Is that how you would?
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that characterization. That being said, like we do at REACH, which is to take a sort of a person-centered approach, my follow-up to that would only be that this is a personal decision, and people are in a position where they need to make that choice for themselves. And that's really important, you know. So what we know is whether or not you get the vaccine, these simple, relative or like low tech interventions with very few downsides, like wearing a mask, social distancing, avoiding large gatherings, all of those things should continue after vaccination. And so if folks are interested in taking a watch and wait approach, you know, they just have to make sure they're doing all of those things to protect themselves if they are choosing to forego the added protection of a vaccine for a period of time. So I don't think it should ever be, seeking to like use it or lose it, you know, now's your chance. You know, that door should be open to folks when they choose to move forward with getting vaccinated. But for me, and based on my, you know, my medical opinion, is absolutely when it's your turn, get the shot.
I want to talk about the word over also, right? So like, can we wait till this is over? We don't know what over looks like or when it is, or, you know, there's some talk about, okay, we've got all these, you know, variants popping up and proliferating, and that's going to change, you know, some of them will change the efficacy of the vaccine. And, you know, is this going to become something like the flu vaccine, where there's sort of a rolling process of, okay, which variants are prevalent in this area? And so for this coming year, how are we going to tweak the vaccine? So I think we need to shift away from what we all hoped for and expected a year ago, that we could just sort of duck and cover for a few months and then be on the other side of it. And whoo, that was a bad storm, right? This is an evolving global pandemic. And so I think hiding from it and I really don't mean if you don't get the vaccine, you're hiding, but I think it would be a sort of a lie to yourself to say, I'll just wait a little bit and then I can go out and play in the puddles. So I, you know, if we're gonna really think realistically here, we have a really good tool right now that can help us, you know, protect the rest of our lives, really. And yeah, I think it's really critical that we encourage people and show people that we want as many people as possible to get vaccinated.
And also to that point, I mean, this may or may not resonate with people, and you know, that's completely fine, but you are not only protecting yourself, you know, you're participating in building herd immunity, community, you know, so there are ethical questions around, you know, around vaccine distribution that we're not getting into on this call, but I think you can know that you're protecting yourself, but you're also helping to protect the community, just like you are when you wear a mask, just like you are when you forego that large gathering. All of that helps you, but it helps everyone. And that's something. So
yeah, and my family's made a lot of choices this year based on the fact that our bubble includes my mom, who's my next door neighbor, right? And she's, you know, more vulnerable to severe COVID than I am, or my husband, or my kids. And so I felt relief for her when I got my vaccine, right? And I felt relief for my, you know, older and sicker patients. Like, oh, I can't, you know, I'm less of a risk. And of course, I'm still wearing a mask all the time, you know, like 100% when I'm not in my attic. But yeah, I think we all have people that we, you know, like kids who can't get a vaccine yet, or, you know, a parent who's 55, you know, people that haven't been able to get their own protection. Like, this is a service.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, one thing I'm just don't want to neglect to mention is like the efficacy far exceeded, I think, anyone's expectations. You know, this is a slam dunk.
Yeah, I
And
couldn't believe it.
it's shocking. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, you know, when we're thinking about the efficacy of like the flu shot, which varies, but it's never as high as any of the vaccines. You know, it approaches the Johnson and Johnson, but that's one of the things about sort of you know, these results, that they exceeded expectations, and this is a powerful tool. So I
That's
think,
great.
yeah.
I love that slam dunk. And to think of the vaccine as another tool that we can all use as a community to support each other and continue to be safe, in addition to wearing a mask and limiting gatherings and things like that. Hi. And so I love that statement, and thank you both. We have a question in our chat from one of our attendees today, just asking, you know, has Reach Practice seen an increase in support or resources from government with the new administration under Biden, or with Cuomo talking about helping vulnerable populations get vaccinated? Is that part of what you're experiencing right now with your outreach, or anything to add on that?
Well, I'm certainly not in a position to speak much about, you know, I don't think Reach has seen like a direct increase in our funding relating to the Biden administration or even Cuomo, but I will add that our founder and CEO, Dr. Justine Waldman, does sit on a regional task force around vaccine equity. So you know, that's, I think, really important. And then I would also add that I think our partnership with the health department has flourished throughout this, and it's a testament, I think, to you know, Frank Krupa's ongoing leadership in this area, and really recognizing the role the position reaches in to reach some parts of our community that trust us because of other aspects of the work we do. So I think that's been really great. You know, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I think in terms of our involvement with the vaccines, you know, that started, I mean, the planning was preceded this, but it was only yesterday that, you know, the large group of people became eligible. But we've been, you know, in partnership with the health department and our outreach work, including at the St. John's Shelter and the homeless encampments, have been sort of doing the on the ground work to connect vaccine to people in harder to reach populations. So I think that's exciting, but very much in its infancy.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add to that real quick that, you know, as distribution increases, we'll be able to see more and more opportunities for creative administration. But we are just waiting on supply at this moment. So I would expect to continue to see that improve and change, and we'll just see what our community is able to put together to get the vaccine out when we're able to. As we're approaching the end of the session, I will give an opportunity if anyone would like to voice your question out loud. Just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll allow you to talk. I'll keep my eye on that. As I'm waiting to see if anyone would like to do that, I'll throw one more question out there. You've alluded to this a little bit. Once you get vaccinated, can you start gathering? Can you stop wearing a mask? Just one final piece about that before we wrap up.
No. Yeah, so I think a couple things go through my mind is that we don't have long-term robust evidence yet that that people who are fully vaccinated are unable to transmit it. So, you know, theoretically that seems really unlikely, right? Like that if I if I'm very well protected against the virus, but if I'm exposed to COVID, there is some potential that I could then give that to a friend, even if I don't get sick myself. So I'm still stopping things from coming into my breathing holes by wearing a mask. The other thing is that the variants that we're seeing and are increasing they're increasing in all areas, right? And quickly, and we don't have the tracking to really know how many and where these variants are, and to do the testing to figure out exactly how effective different vaccines are against various variants. So for those reasons, my sort of health hackles are still up. I am going to continue to always wear a mask, to have neighborhood 6 foot of parties out in the, in our puffy coats. And that's just going to remain critical. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Well, thank you so much to both of you for your time today, for sharing with us a little bit more about Reach Medical and about your own experiences with getting vaccinated. I'm not seeing any other questions coming through or any hands raised from our audience attendees today. So I'll just give the floor back to you if there's any last minute thing you want to share while you have us.
I think Judy didn't mention the educational component of Reach, and it's really cool, and you're the one that knows the most about it. So.
We both know a lot. So Liz and I both work with residents, which is it's a stage in medical training after you complete medical school when you're specializing. So you're a physician, but you're not like fully licensed or board certified, and you can't work independently. But most people in medical education don't have an opportunity to learn about harm reduction, or even learn about medications for opioid use disorder or the way to treat addiction. It's really an area of medical education that is lacking for most trainees. And so we have an opportunity to work with the residents from Cayuga Medical Center at Reach, and that's been an awesome experience. And I think it's a big service to our community and the communities they'll serve in the future, as well as the RN nursing program from TC3, which is a fantastic program, which is a pipeline for our community to have nurses. So the nurses are also working with our fantastic team of nurses. We also work with SUNY Binghamton with several of their training programs. And I think, so our model is innovative and equity oriented, but we know that we can't just do it alone. So we're working in partnership with all of the, training programs in our community to equip other healthcare workers to work in a similar way. And then we're trying to study it, so to see what's effective, so we can contribute to a burgeoning body of literature around this type of healthcare, which is really what we're doing at Reach is sort of unique, even sort of at a national level. So it's exciting work here in our community. I think one thing in Tompkins is we have so much. We're very fortunate community, and I think I would just ask us all to continuously think about what do our neighbors have access to that we have, and how do we work as a community to ensure access for everybody. That's critical, and especially when you think about infectious disease, helping your neighbor out helps you out. That's true for most things, in my opinion, but it's particularly true when you're talking about an infectious disease. So, I think, it's an honor and a privilege to be here today. Thank you for having us. Thank you for recognizing Reach for the work it's doing. And, we're thrilled to continue that mission of expanding access to every corner of our community, really.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've been really proud and happy, relieved to be in the county we're in during this crazy year and the coming crazy year. So thank you for all of your work
Well, thank you. Thank you both so much. Looking forward to continued partnership with Reach Medical. And one last plug on my end for you all to join us tomorrow evening, Wednesday, the 17th at 5 o'clock, live streamed on the county's YouTube channel. I threw the link in the chat here. You'll be able to ask questions at that point about distribution and administration, as well as any other concerns you have about ongoings in the community related to COVID-19. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much to Judy and Liz from Reach Medical. Great conversation today. And thank you for all that you and your team are doing.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Stay warm, everybody.
Yeah, you too.